In its remarkable 14-year journey, Dasra Philanthropy Week has played a pivotal role in shaping narratives, fostering collaborations and conversations, and catalyzing actions across diverse sectors. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to one and all as we embark to celebrate the 15th edition of Dasra Philanthropy. With a convergence of diverse stakeholders and voices within the development ecosystem, DPW 2024 is anchored around the theme of Thrive Through Equity. This year, we have more than 30 convenings, both virtual and in person combined, where we are engaging with 150 plus thought leaders to shape a dialogue with more than 1,500 stakeholders. With a lens of gender, equity, diversity, and inclusion, this event hopes to be an enriching and insightful experience that will help shape a collective perspective for shaping the future of India. Before we begin the session, sharing a few housekeeping rules. For clear audio and speaker view, we've disabled participant mics and videos. We request you to also respect the privacy of speakers and refrain from sending any personal messages on chat. Other than this, we invite you to use the chat, of course, for questions, to participate in any discussions. If you have any trouble with technology, please DM us, the host. We will try to fix the issue at the earliest. Through the course of the session, there will also be Hindi translation available that can be accessed through the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. Thank you so much. Looking forward to a great discussion. Handing it over to Ravi, who will be moderating this session. Over to you, Ravi. Looking forward to the whole discussion.
Okay, great. Hey, welcome everybody. Today afternoon is an exciting day as we discuss about a topic that is very close to my heart, which is around how do you use AI for social good and how do you make sure this is used to solve some of the biggest challenges that this nation faces. In the past, we have seen similar journeys, although in slightly different areas, like which are known as digital public infrastructure, like an Aadhaar or UPI, fundamental alter, the profile or the accessibility that, let's say, even the poorest has, whether be it in terms of bank accounts or DBT or direct transfer of subsidies, etc. We believe that similar promise the AI technology also holds. Having spent some time in it, there are a couple of things that are happening, be it personalized learning, which allows anybody to learn one-on-one with, let's say, a chatbot-enabled AI, or increasing agriculture productivity because agriculture is data heavy and you could use remote sensing, etc., to monitor, even do early pest detection, or you look at healthcare early detection. So I think the list goes on and on. Today we have an amazing panel, and I know there's some of the panelists were, I think, still struggling to get on, but I hope they will get on very soon. Today we have an amazing set of panelists from various sectors, and I'm going to request one by one each of them to come on and share their backgrounds and what do they do and their organization does in terms of solving some of the big challenges this nation has. So why don't I go ahead and begin with Manish from Google. Go ahead, Manish, floor is yours.
Thanks, Ravi. So I lead Google Research India. So one of the key themes that we have to drive our work is inclusive AI. How do we develop AI in a manner that brings the benefits to everyone? So let me start with just giving you maybe a couple of examples of how we are really trying to make these benefits, right, of AI reach people, right, that have previously been untouched by AI. So one of them is our work on agricultural landscape understanding, and identifying events in fields from satellite imagery. So the idea is that for so many of these different use cases, right, for farmers, let's say if farmers need credit to a loan or insurance product, or let's say the government needs to make certain decisions about planning for, let's say, minimum support price or planning for subsidies and so on. Today, a lot of these decisions are not made at a like a are made at a very aggregate level, and sometimes there is lack of information about, let's say, the farmers, what's going on in the farmer's farm, that comes in the way of making good decisions. So what we have built is the first such model that for the entire scale of the country of India, based on usage patterns, it will show different field boundaries. It will identify the crops that are growing. It will identify other things like sources of water and so on that are available. And the idea is that this hopefully provides the bottom layers of this agri stack, just like there was Aadhaar ID, which gave a unique ID to each human, that laid the foundation for other services like mobile payments and so on, right? To be simply transformed, um, giving a unique ID to each farm in the country gives you that kind of a starting point, and then identifying what's going on at the farm, right? What crop is being grown, and even like uh, tracking what's happening over a period of time, and so on, that can give you valuable insight. So that's one example. We've also been working with in the public health space. In particular, there's a collaboration with a nonprofit called Arman, which is helping improve maternal and child health. So they enroll expectant mothers into this program called Emitra, and send out these voice messages every week of the pregnancy. There are two messages that are delivered through a phone call that gives them valuable tips that in this week of the pregnancy you should be okay. This time you should be taking iron tablets to avoid the risk of, again, anemia. And the problem they saw was that many mothers end up dropping out of that program, and they have very few human volunteers to now reach out to manage this entire program. So, which are the important kind of women that these few human volunteers should reach out to turn them around, right, and keep them engaged in this program? Again, our team formulated this as this restless multi-armed bandits problem, and developed this AI model, uh, uh, which in fact has been deployed with this organization Arman. And there have been multiple uh, field studies that have been done, which over over 20,000 beneficiaries, which show that this AI model does lead to very significant increase in the engagement of the bottom percentile of listeners. And in fact, it is preventing a lot of close to 30% of these women from dropping out. And there was something like 130% increase in the amount of content that they listened to. So these are just a few examples of how we've been applying AI to bring benefits to farmers or bring benefits to expecting mothers from underprivileged backgrounds, to bring those benefits to them. So let me pass it back to you, Ravi.
Okay, that's exciting. If I may ask you, uh, which is something that you're really excited about among, the advancements that you have? And I think Google is very deep into the space AI for social good. Is there like one area that you want to kind of highlight, that's something that you're proud of, or something that you think is phenomenal, either success or some early signs of, making a huge impact like Aadhaar? So,
No, sure. So actually, I'll share two areas, but maybe I can come back after maybe the other speakers get a chance.
sure.
So I would say our work on both language inclusivity, and we all know that these large language models are extremely expensive to run. They require very expensive hardware, which is increasingly very hard to even find. So some really breakthroughs in how you optimize these models, uh, so that ultimately the objective is to democratize access. Because if you want, again, hundreds of millions of people in India to be able to utilize these services, they have to be made affordable. And the
Yeah.
only way they would be affordable is if they can be run extremely efficiently on modern hardware. So that's an area in which we have had some breakthroughs. And in fact, even on the social good, there have been a series of methodological advances. And in fact, our lead researcher, Milind Tambe, who also has a joint appointment with Harvard, in fact, he recently won the AAAI AI for Humanities Prize in recognition of his work, particularly the work he's done in AI for social good, including the work with Arman.
Awesome, great. So with that, I'll move on to the next speaker. I don't know, Shekhar, if you're there, maybe you can come in. I think you are here, I see you. And if you can share a little bit more about the work that you do with Vadvani. I know you guys have some amazing work both in healthcare and agriculture. Over to you, Shekhar.
Thank you. Our institute is called Vadvani Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And our mission is to provide AI solutions for social good and social impact. So the institute exists for only one reason, which is to scale solutions using AI pan-India. So we have arguably one of the largest teams in the world working on this space. We have 200 people. Now we have over 20 solutions in healthcare, agriculture, and education. And shortly we will have some in the urban area as well. So the aspects, I can give you just two examples. One is in health. We partner. Okay, so the way we operate is we partner closely with the government of India. If you want to do anything on scale, you have to be deeply working with the government of India. So our teams co-locate and sit within government offices, in the health ministry, in the education ministry, in agriculture, in state setups, because like I said, our only goal, our only existence principle is to scale and deliver AI in India. So one of the solutions is the clinical decision support system, which is integrated into a platform called eSanjeevani. The eSanjeevani is rolled out as a telemedicine platform that is available to 150,000 primary healthcare centers in the rural setup in India, with an approximate annual caseload of about 7 to 8 crore. And we started by implementing a form-based approach so that the data that was being captured in a relatively unstructured manner could be captured in a much more rule-based manner. Using that, we elicited a set of questions. So the way we do this is when a potential patient is waiting for a consultation, teleconsultation with the doctor, and working with a community health officer, the CHO has an opportunity to interact with the patient and then ask a few questions, come out with the summary, do the provisional diagnostics using AI, and then make that information along with the symptoms and the basis of coming to the conclusion to a certain extent to the doctor. So to a very large extent, we have tried to be as explanation oriented as we could within the constraints of using AI models. We've also standardized the manner in which such information will be collected, along with SNOMED-CT, which is an international standard. What this means is that from a design perspective, we would like it to be equitable, fair, immediately accessible. The way AI will work in India is there's going to be first stage is going to be adoption and large-scale adoption. And we are in that right now. Last year, we finished over 1 crore users. This year, we want to get 10 crore people using our AI solution. So this one, while the total caseload is 7 crore, we expect AI to play an intervention in about 1 crore, 1.5 crore or more. So we're in the process of scaling this with the government. Along with this, we have multiple chatbots, one for ASHA workers to assist them in their work. Another interesting solution that may be of value to discuss here is something called oral reading fluency, fairly quickly developed using existing technologies with Bhashini and others. But essentially what it offers is for grade 2 to grade 8 children in Gujarat, the entire schooling system. It offers right now a evaluation and later a development tool so that they start speaking well. In my opinion, in my assessment, this is a foundation technology that will transform India. One of the most important aspects we are planning to do with this, it's rolled out right now to over 2 million students, shortly 6 million students in Gujarat. My goal is to see if we can roll it out pan-India to the entire student community and then to a citizen-facing view. Let me give you an example of how this can be used maybe in the future. Let's assume that you are a plumbing community in speaking Marathi in semi-urban parts of, say, Mumbai, Thane, Pune, other parts, and you ply your trade, it is reasonable to assume that if your capability of conversing with your customer is significantly enhanced in terms of improving your skills of making sure you're well understood and making sure you're consistent about what you do, this can arguably translate to bigger economics. It's a self-initiative. It's available to a person. Right now, it is not. I'm just giving you the future of such an example. Right now, it works within a constrained setup of a school evaluation within the schooling system of Gujarat with both Gujarati and English. We plan to roll it out in multiple languages. Just a couple of examples. Again, this by definition is constructed with inclusivity, with equity, with gender balance, with everything. One of the important things, especially when you work in the social sector, is to understand the ecosystem that you work in. You don't have high digitization, no urbanization, no drop-down, no radio buttons. The simplest interface, ideally voice-enabled. So we really look forward over the next 3 to 5 years to see advancements along 2 or 3 dimensions, which is a mandatory requirement if AI has to be adopted in India at scale. Number one, the ability to fluently move across languages, which means LLMs constructed not on English or on Chinese or on a few languages, but in Oriya and Tamil and Telugu, and every language that you can think of must be represented in the language space. So I'm working with with institutes like IIT. I'm part of their team developing and thinking through Bharat GPT and Bharat Data Sagar, which is the backbone models which will have to be constructed. Second, the user community, the ability to be able to deliver such solutions with ease. Third, the government community, to make sure that the government officials and others are given solutions that align well with national goals. We do work in TB elimination. We do work in various other things. So essentially, in short, meaningful AI solutions. I will just end with one simple sentence. AI will be successful if it can address a market of one person, unique human being with unique requirements. The day we do that well, AI will succeed in India. The moment you start generalizing, you start establishing stereotypes, you get into trouble. So the way AI should be designed, constructed, rolled out, validated, tested, evaluated, explained, has to have this basic design construct. Not easy, not available in this world. That's what is needed for us. Thanks. Back to you, Ravi.
That's great. Super personalized. So I was going to say just one quick follow-up. You rightly recognize the need for rapid adoption for it to really make it to the grassroots. Do you want to touch a little more on, as a follow-up, on what needs to happen for this adoption to really take place? Because I think you are in that journey. Yeah.
Yes. And it is arguably in all of AI, this is the most difficult part of AI. The ability to work with an ecosystem in a non-judgmental, non-complaining, non-criticizing manner, to recognize that we are as imperfect as the ecosystems around us. All digital systems in the world are always work in progress. There is nothing complete. I have seen the most advanced systems in the world. By definition, it is created by a set of people who have a cognitive understanding of the technology and the problems at that particular point in time. 5 years later, it's very easy to be critical of what you did some time ago. So we have to be very careful of understanding and adopting at a systems level what we have. Second, you need to reach out to as wide a community as possible, as quickly as possible, which means you need to have a reasonable exchange of trust so that the individual users and the ecosystem understand and believe why you are participating in your space. We're an NGO. We have absolutely no motives of profit. That's a very important aspect of social systems, because you do need to be very clear. We're a very tech organization, only one of its kind. We do pure tech work. We have married 2 ends of the spectrum, advanced technology to the people who need it the most. We need to constantly educate at all levels. We need to debunk the hype. We need to allow AI to remain what it is, just a tool. We really need to address the larger context of the ecosystem, which is outside of the AI. The AI can be considered, simple terms, to be a plug point on, a hole in the wall, a socket hole. It either gives 5 amps or 15 amps. We must reduce AI to that level of simplicity so that our chatter and talk can be on the complex problem solving that can take place, the richness of which exists in the domain. So a lot of the missing pieces tend to be in simplifying the domain, coming out with simple solutions, and then getting a little puzzled when they don't work. It's much easier to embrace the complexity of the world at large, address it systematically, and then make sure that you actually design for that space. Why am I saying that? That builds the backbone of trust. If you want to start with trust, you have to expose your vulnerability. And our vulnerability is lack of precise knowledge, ambiguity, materiality, what makes sense, what doesn't, uncertainty. And in India, there are so many inherent independent variables that contribute to each of these factors. If you are unwilling to embrace it and just slice it and make it a very simple problem, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You have to be willing to constantly reinvent. It is also my personal belief that the AI solutions that even we are working on in the next 2 to 3 years will become throwaway after that. As we understand things better, as we create better connections, as the robustness improves, as we realize our mistakes, both in modeling and data processing and data pre-processing aspects. I expect all of these uncertainties to hit us as we go through the domain. The better we are in being open about our, I won't call it inadequacies, I will again say vulnerabilities, and work with the ecosystem with the vulnerabilities that are existing around. It's a relatively easier way to address scaled implementation. This is what we have found across all our spaces, completely consistent across the entire aspect, right from, honestly, the Prime Minister who we've met down to the person who uses the solution, who also we have met.
Awesome. There are a lot of points to double click. I'll come back to you. Thank you, Shekhar, for that. Over to you, Simin. I would love to hear your story and what you do in the agriculture space.
Thanks, Ravi. So thanks, Dasra, for having me today. So my name is Simin, and I'm a co-founder of an agri-tech organization called Gramhal. So at Gramhal, our mission is to democratize data for farmers. And towards that mission, the way we are trying to use AI is to provide farmers personalized advice, something that Shekhar very beautifully kind of brought about in the AI space. So what we're trying to do using AI is to give farmers hyperlocal, contextual, and effective advice that works. So for example, if you're a farmer in Chhindwara in Madhya Pradesh, you should be able to ask AI that I have a black soil, what variety of maize should I grow for me to have a better yield given the context of the nature and the weather that I'm in. And I think that's the vision that we are starting out with. And the goal really is that farmers should be able to make better decisions. They should be able to change their decisions using the solutions that are built on AI. However, I think with complete acknowledgement that we are very far away from getting to that very personalized level of advice that can lead to better decision making. But I think that's the aspiration for us. And I think one of the learnings that we have had by working with the rural communities is that for AI to really work for rural India, I think there has to be two things. One is that there has to be a bottoms-up approach where the communities are not just participating, but like riding the wave of the AI. They're contributing in building the data sets. And I think that is how I think we will build on, the language inclusivity, the LLM models, and take it to a level of personalization there. And I think that is the hope that we are kind of setting out for ourselves.
Great. If I may just double click on one point. I know your solution caters to farmers. How do you look for, I guess, the small and marginal farmers? Is there, something that you do specifically, or like, how does your solution help them, which often don't get these technologies?
So Ravi, I think right now the solution, of course, is in the phase it is where we're building our MVP, and I think it caters to farmers who have smartphones, and unfortunately it does leave out a lot of small and marginal farmers. But what we're trying to do in terms of inclusivity is we have moved away from the text-based query format and moved to voice-based query format. So if you're a farmer who cannot read and write or have limited levels of literacy, you should be able to talk into the phone, ask a question, and get the response back in a voice format. And I think that's the way we're looking at inclusivity with the limited, with the boundaries of smartphone that we have.
Great, great, awesome. So I think I want to go on to the second topic, back to everybody in the panel here, which is around inclusivity. So there are some fundamental things, the challenges that AI brings, and I'll put all on the table, and depending on which one you want to speak on, given there are so many we can talk about. One is around, there is an argument, and this is for everybody, not only Simin, which is, it is increasing digital divide between, those who can use digital and not. The other argument is, while the LLMs have been trained, they have been trained largely on data sets which are English or Western in nature, which means there will be a set of bias. There are hallucination issues. Then today, there are not enough policy guardrails. Anybody on everybody is launching an AI system for everybody. I mean, including people who are the most marginalized and who probably cannot take that risk, right? There are not enough policy guardrails. And again, they are getting created as we speak. And then finally, this fourth issue on what is known as super intelligence and super alignment in few years, when the computer will be more intelligent than the human being, how do you monitor? I guess so. Those are some of the fundamental criticism or challenges facing. I would love to hear maybe one by one, or whoever wants to go first, your thoughts on how some of these aspects you're thinking about today, and what are we doing, yeah, I mean, I don't know if Manish, you want to go first, or Simin, or yeah.
Sure, happy to go first. Yeah, so again, let me start with like a key challenge on, you mentioned, right, the haves and have-nots, right? So one of the issues we wanted to really pay attention to is, all of us, right, who are, let's say, maybe attending this particular session, I consider us the privileged ones, right, who understand English, who have information at our fingertips. Now, if we want to provide that same level of information, right, to that, let's say, farmer's son in Chhattisgarh or the laborer's daughter in Assam, how do we empower them, right, with that same level of information that you and I have access to? So that's kind of a topic that our team has been thinking a lot about and addressing it in their work. And in particular, we noticed that, again, India, we are a very diverse country with so many different languages, and only about 10% of us are really understand or comfortable with English as a language. So actually, before I talk about our work with other languages, one of the things we noticed was even the English that we speak in India is often a superset of formal English. So we drew this inspiration from this appetizer menu that we saw at a restaurant, where appetizer is being spelled as APITAIJAR. So what happens is that even when you look at kind of spell correction, when people type queries using the Roman script, but really derived from either a Hindi word or the rendition of that word in Hindi, and then they transcribe it. Often there are kind of variants of spellings that they use that would not be caught by simple spell checkers. So we kind of came up with this model called Indophoneme, which is able to then model all of these variants, and it was used in Google search spell correction to be able to understand the user intent better. Then our team built a model called Mural, which about 3 years ago, which at that time provided the largest coverage of Indian languages. It covered 16 Indian languages plus English. And on a variety of various language benchmarks, it was showing significant improvements over the previous state of the art. And so we made that model freely available on TensorFlow Hub and on Hugging Face. And of course, utilize that model for Google's own products like the Google Assistant. And at that time, I remember challenging our team to say, look, can you handle all 22 scheduled languages of India? And I was very happy to see Partha Talukdar, right, our lead on that work, come back and said, look, I want to do a lot better than 22 scheduled languages, because he did some analysis and said that, look, there are 60 Indian languages that have over 1 million speakers each, and there are 125 languages which have over 100,000 speakers each. So he said, I want to build this model, which we call Morni, which will understand all of these 125 plus Indian languages. Now, this is easier said than done because of these 125 languages, 72 are so-called zero corpus languages. That means you have zero known digital data for those languages. So we embarked on this project called Vani together with Indian Institute of Science, where we started collecting speech data from different districts of India. And we have been making all of that data freely available to all researchers, practitioners, startups, anybody is welcome to make use of this data. So we've already finished phase 1, where we collected data from 80 districts. We are in the middle of phase 2. And by the end of phase 3, our goal is to collect data from each and every one of the 773 districts of India so that we capture the full diversity of languages, dialects, accents in India, and are able to then build models that truly understand. Now, one of the issues that arises is when you're building these models, there's a lot of kind of competition that happens for different languages within, let's say, a given large language model. Because let's say you include a data set which has very good coverage of Indian languages. If you include all of that data set in your pre-training, the model that you end up with, um, its performance on languages like English and so on may get worse. And sometimes, right, for global companies, that part, it's not acceptable, right, to kind of hurt the performance on some very, very widely used language just because you want better coverage of Indian languages. So our team recently came up with this very interesting innovation called, I haven't named it here, Calm, which is a way to compose two language models. So think about, let's say, a language model that you've built, which has very good understanding of Indian languages, but it's not like as large as some of those large language models. So it doesn't have the same world knowledge, reasoning capabilities as your large language model like Gemini out of Google or Llama or GPT-4. So our team then came up with a methodology, and this is a paper which will be presented at ICLR conference later this year on how to compose these two models automatically and get the best of both worlds. So the original models remain unchanged, but now you're able to combine the benefits, the power of both of these models. So you get the reasoning and world knowledge and all of that capability of the large language model together with the Indian language understanding, right, of this very India specific model that you're able to build. So that's kind of one I think, very, very interesting innovation that I'm very proud of that recently came from our team. Uh, Another, I mean, I don't know if we have time. I mean, I can briefly talk about another
Sure.
innovation, which I talked about, right? As we scale these large language models, right, to, let's say, India level scale, where we want hundreds of millions of users, uh, these things need to be made extremely efficient, right? And today we know, let's say you have a 50 billion parameter model, it's very expensive to run, right, while serving. So so one of the problems you have is today these models are very rigid. Um, you have, let's say, even Google today talks about this ultra Gemini model, there's a pro Gemini model, and there's a nano model. And a given workload has to be run on one of these three models, or any query has to be served by one of these three models. And to me, this is very analogous to the pre-virtualization ancient era when workloads needed to be run on a fixed number of processors, fixed set of compute resources. And just like virtualization and cloud, right, enable this elasticity of compute, we want to now enable elasticity of these ML model power. That depending on the query, if you have a very simple query, you should not need a very large size model. A small size Gemini model ought to be enough, or whatever GPT model should be enough. Whereas if you have a very complex query, then you utilize the larger model. And to achieve that, our team has now come up with this set of breakthroughs called Matryoshka models, which are nested models that basically, when training a transformer model, instead of just like one size model, at each layer, you can train 4 different sizes all at once, and you can mix and match as you combine different layers. You can get an exponentially large number of possibilities of these models. And what we have shown is that the accuracy of these models is actually as good as kind of the accuracy as if you have trained these models from scratch. So as a result, now you have again thousands of variants of these models, and then in the future you would be able to dynamically select, given kind of the complexity of the task at hand. You will be able to say, oh, send it to this very, for a simple task, send it to this very small size model. For this intermediate task, send it to maybe a medium size model. For this really complex task, send it to the really large model. And our intuition is that a vast majority of tasks will be relatively simple, so that you should be able to save substantially, right, in terms of the cost. And at the same time, still being able to serve. Somebody wanted like a really tough math problem to be tackled by these models. Again, you should be able to then utilize the full power of these models for those.
Great. So in the interest of time, I'll quickly ask Simeen and Shekhar also to quickly respond. We have some amazing questions in the chat. I'm going to pick them up. Simeen, go ahead on this question that we raised, and then Shekhar.
So I think, Ravi, I will talk more from the use case perspective about
Yes,
data
yes.
bias and hallucination that you've spoken about. I think when you look at personalized advice, one wrong advice, especially in case of farmers, can affect livelihoods at a large scale. And I think that is why it's also very important for us as we build AI to be very aware of what cannot work and put guardrails around that. And I think what we are learning in our early phases of building is that AI and farmer interaction in a silo is not enough. We cannot be like, okay, if you're a farmer, ask a question to an AI, the AI is going to respond to it and you implement that. I think it has to be a non-siloed interaction where there are feedback loops, there are peers, and AI at this stage where we're still building it out has to be one of the peers which keeps learning and keeps suggesting. And there are other peers and other farmers who verify, vet, give feedback on that suggestion, because we are not there yet. The second thing I think that I think has already been said, but I do want to kind of echo that again, and the importance of it is that we have to crowdsource the data from bottoms up if we have to make this work. I think we have to build on all the languages work, for example, that Manish's team is doing, and kind of take it forward from the community and say that we need, once we have everything in Bhojpuri ready, once AI can understand Bhojpuri, the content now has to come from the community for it to really work effectively, is something that that I really want to talk about when we talk about data bias. So just these 2 points, Ravi, from my end.
Yeah, great. Shekhar, you want to add something? I know you touched on it in the opening as well. Yeah.
Yes. So very briefly, first of all, I agree with what Manish says. I will just complement it a slightly different way. I'll just give you a small real life example which happened last week when I met some folks. So we have an Asha chatbot. Typically, what do? You go to an LLM, you find Unity to different things. So we did it the other way around. So our question is, let us look at any place. Just for simplicity, let's assume it's a Hindi-speaking place. Let's assume that it's in Uttar Pradesh. Any place, it doesn't matter. You select it, put your finger on it, select it. Okay, very good. Simple question. I have 100 documents, 200 documents, and I want to query and provide a reliable voice-based interface to an Asha worker. So that itself, we're finding it difficult. Extend the problem in a simple manner. I roam around circularly in a radius of 1 kilometer increment. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20. I will encounter 30 dialects. Now, you have to roll out the solution. This is the ask. If today I have a solution like this, government will adopt it overnight. They will adopt it by tomorrow morning. That is my assurance. The technology has a gap. Forget the reasons. I'm just giving it in a very plain manner. I gave you an artificial problem with a very real context. Go anywhere. Start at L1, L2, lat long. Start roaming around. You will immediately find a multitude of aspects which you have to solve for in order for AI to be effective. And I agree with Manish that the concept of generalization and specialization always tear at one another. Specialization is very interesting, but always will question the level of investment or the level of other matters that naturally runs this world, which includes profitability and meaningfulness. But from a social perspective, if you have to be successful, you have to address those 50 dialects. If you cannot, it's not about just addressing end languages, which is very important. That is the way you construct it. Absolutely correct. It's a natural way of constructing it. But you will only solve the problem on the ground when you solve it on the ground. No pun intended. You have to solve it at that person's problem. This, and with its simple example, you can extend its manifestation to gender, to social status, to religion, to economics, to employment, level of education. You just keep extending it. These are all dimensions that describe each human being that will play into the scaled usage of AI. This is something we have learned thoroughly in the last 2 years. We know this. We feel it in us. We know it. If you want to scale, you either have to cookie cutter the world, which is very difficult to do in India, or you have to have a solution that addresses the diversity, which is also very difficult. So with that, I will stop.
Okay, no, some amazing points. I was going to pick up from the chat some questions that have come, and some of them maybe, let's see. So the one question that has come is, can we understand the costs that go into developing the AI tech versus the more traditional way? And can we say that these benefits actually outweigh the costs? It's an interesting question. Also, if you're in a nonprofit or a social sector, I don't know how many social sector organizations can, use philanthropic capital towards such innovation. So I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab or anybody has a...
No, on that, I just like to make a point, right? That it is important to see the current trend, right? If you go back 6 years ago, for any problem, right, you had to train a new AI model from scratch. Now, the new trends, right, of these foundation models are dramatically changing that equation. You no longer, for every task, you do not need to train and build a separate model. You now have these very, very powerful models. Of course, they continue to have many, many problems, right? As Ravi, you mentioned, there's hallucination, there's fairness issues, all kinds of open challenges. But again, those are exciting problems, right, for researchers to work on. So there are still really, really important open problems with how these models are built. But still, yet, these are amazingly powerful models, which now an organization like a nonprofit and so on, it need not have now necessarily that AI expertise. They can simply, as users of these technologies, right, come up with effective AI-based solutions, right, to these problems, because those underlying models have that capability to be fine-tuned for the specific problems at hand, right, through things like sometimes prompt engineering, sometimes like further fine-tuning, and so on.
Got it. Yeah, that's the power of LLMs. Anybody else wants to chime in on the cost side? Okay.
I have a quick comment. We are very conscious of cost. So even with the usage of LLMs, with commercially SOTA, which is state-of-the-art tools, we try and provide our solutions at 100 or 1,000th of the cost. So just as an example, the oral reading fluency solution costs for a 5-minute audio, it costs 0.00083 cents. So dollars, sorry. Let me just check the unit once. But it is often 100,000 times lower than what's available. You have to be committed to providing solutions at that level for adoption.
Another quick point I wanted to make was most of the AI technologies are available freely in open source form, right? So even the large language models, I mean, there have been models from Llama, Mistral, and now I was very happy to see we've been internally championing this for a while. And I was really happy to see my own company, Google, also release these open models, Gemma, that were announced. So now it is possible, right, for practitioners, for others, right, in the research community. They do not need to build all of those models from scratch. They can start with these open source frameworks, these open source models, and a lot of other like ML work. I mean, the really good thing about AI and ML research is that there's been that very strong culture of openness where people freely are encouraged to publish their work and so on. So certainly companies like Google, Meta, uh, uh, regrettably not OpenAI, unfortunately, but many of these companies continue to be at the forefront, right, of publishing all of their advances.
Got it. Great.
And just to add to that, I think the investment of large language models will continue to be with large tech companies. There is going to be an asymmetry in that. So what does the rest of the world do? We do fine-tuned models.
Yeah.
So that's how the world is divided.
So there was another question, which is a very interesting and fundamental one around data protection and privacy. How do you take care of the personal data, as these models are trained? There have been instances, again, this is a live question. I don't know, anybody wants to share any thoughts of, also this question is around how do you accept anonymization for LLMs and things along privacy aspect. I think that's very crucial, and would love to hear Shekhar, Manish, or Simin if you have any thoughts.
Sure, I can maybe start. So we take privacy extremely seriously. So Google and many other companies have formulated these AI principles, and what we do is pretty much right from the stage of data collection to model building to eventually, right, things being launched in products, they go through these very, very rigorous reviews. Now, are we perfect in those reviews? No. There's still kind of, all of us are learning as an industry, but a lot of care goes into right at the time of data collection, right? How do you do it in a manner that is really honoring the principles of privacy? So especially for instance, any of this, like say personal data and so on, right? For instance, when we work on these projects on public health, right, with organizations like Arman, we absolutely make sure that we are not getting any access to any of the personal data, right, for individuals, and it's going through very significant audits. And ultimately, we really try to make sure that even our access to some of this data is only initially for the purposes of deploying the models. Ultimately, our goal is to, and in fact, we have been deploying these models right at the NGO itself, so that in operations, ultimately, we are not even seeing the operational data once these models are deployed. Yes, so it's an extremely important issue, and certainly I think there's a lot of care that most companies, at least responsible companies, pay attention to in terms of honoring the privacy.
Shekhar, you want to add? Or Simin?
Basically, you have your tech aspects of anonymization, making sure PII is safeguarded, and all of that naturally is in place. What's also important for several initiatives, which are country-based initiatives, there is a requirement to do the compute within the country. Data in motion also should not be shared. In other words, you cannot send an inference to a country, to a foreign land. So you've got to have the constructs. So this comes down to multiple aspects. The demand needs to be large enough so that suppliers of cloud and other provisioners, they're in this business for a reason. They make profits, etc. They see this as an opportunity. So there needs to be aggregate demand of a certain volume. And then you need to also build these other models. I think over time, there will be a much greater degree of comfort if all of the data, all of the tech stuff, the PII, anonymization, that's one part. There's a much larger question that often comes up that, look, I've put this beautifully, but I've put it in one place. What if the whole thing gets sideswiped? Then there is a much larger risk. The questions you often hear is when a whole database gets hacked or a whole situation goes out of control. I expect quite a bit of attention over the next 2 years. We have a very strong relationship directly with MeitY and with others, where we are formulating policy strategy around this. So I expect over a period of time these things to settle down. But we are in discovery phase, and I think it'll take a couple of years for this to neatly settle down, for us to have strict policies, specific rules based on the risk profile. Now, if you take a pest, an agriculture pest photograph on a field, that is slightly different from taking a chest X-ray of a potential cancer patient.
Right.
So it's going to be differential. It's not going to be the same. So there's going to be all types of nuances that I don't think anybody has yet thought about. Again, I will emphasize the business model. Anything will only scale when there is a viable business model. When I say business, I'm not necessarily talking profit. I'm saying there needs to be a meaningful, scalable model. Somebody has to fund it.
Yeah. From an impact perspective,
somebody will have to pay the money.
Yeah. So I was going to say thanks so much, Shekhar. There are a couple of questions or rather suggestions around partnerships. I think some people in the education sector want to leverage some of the models. So I'll probably pass them on to Shekhar and Manish as the case may be. There is a question around, can you share your thoughts on how capacities of NGO as well as end beneficiary can be built to use AI for social good? Have you faced any challenges and share some learning? Can you also throw light? How do you ensure that the end beneficiary is included in the process and tech and data as you build it? I don't know, Simeen, you want to take, Shekhar, anybody, how do you include the communities and how can NGOs on this call, a lot of them, actually bring it to what they do? How are you using maybe AI at your work in some sense? Go ahead. Yeah.
I think, Ravi, that's a very important question. And I think as Manish said previously, I think that trust is a very important factor. And I think Shekhar also alluded this very strongly, that especially if you're working with communities directly, I think if you want them to be involved in using your services, which are which have AI in them as a component, I think trust is the backbone of all of that. And as an example, I think I'll tell you the story that we work with Jivika in Bihar, and because our input is in speech format, we ask Didis to ask the question, and they're like, what if I ask a question that's related to maternal health? And what if someone else hears it from other community and knows that this is me and this is my voice and I've asked this question? I don't want that other person to know that I am asking this question. I have this personal problem in my life, right? And I think it is so important then to think about how do you make this happen? Even, if you're using speech format, how do you still anonymize that at the product level? And not even at the backend level. And I think these are some things that we're still working on. I think Shekhar and Manish should be able to kind of answer this better than I can, but I think we're still learning how to do that, how to completely do that, and how to build that trust and bridge with the communities when they're using technologies, especially in the rural context.
Yeah, and I think the question has two parts. One is how do you use local data from the communities? Go ahead, Shekhar.
Two aspects I want to address, and both are equally important. So when we rolled out the pest management, we're in our 4th year, we'll probably be handing it over to the government. But that aside, we actually sit down. We've got an all-women user research team that actually lives with farmers for periods of time, not half a day, several days. Every district they visited across 10 to 15 states. They sit down, they actually physically visit the farm, they sit down with the people. They answer all types of questions that people may have. And that's a very important aspect that NGOs that would like to participate can scale. So this is one aspect. The whole conversational aspect of socializing AI is a very important. So that's one. The other piece of the puzzle is to do it with the policymakers. We have capacity building. We've done, I think, about 100 sessions. I would be surprised. Literally thousands of officials in government settings. That's the second. So both of this builds knowledge, awareness, capacity about this technology. This is one. Equally importantly, I think this is, if not more, is to build capacity in the technical workforce in India. We should be able to conceptualize ourselves as having entry-level jobs in AI, where you can do, let's assume 5 years from now, there are about a few thousand models on the field, which require maintenance, upkeep, mature models. Do you want the same person who built the model to continue? Similar to software. There is a transition of complexity when you are in the early phase of the life cycle. The complexity reduces dramatically once it starts getting more mature. But then where is the workforce to tend to it? Do you not want to go to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 colleges and establish in context maybe 1 million or 2 million people on a workforce basis that is available to the government? That commodity, AI will become commodity after some time. Today it's doing what it is doing, it will become commodity. There'll be a small amount of high-end research, but the rest of it will get commoditized. Where is the receiving agency? Who is going to manage that? Are we continuing to pay the types of money that we are paying today for what I would consider to be somewhat mundane work in the future? So there are 3 aspects: engage with the users, engage with the government, and build capacity across the board. Sorry, I'm having a problem.
No worries. I think some great points. I guess in the interest of time, I was going to summarize the panel, but why don't I go around and ask you for closing thoughts, each one of you. I know we covered a broad variety of topics and some very technical and some on the grassroots level. So maybe each of you, if you can just give a short, quick summary of closing thoughts, and then I'll summarize.
Okay, so
Go
maybe
ahead.
I can start. So again, thanks Ravi for bringing us all together. I think this is a very important topic that you've organized this discussion on, especially for a country like India. It is extremely important. AI is an extremely powerful technology, and it is really our responsibility to make sure it is developed, deployed, um, and enhanced, right, in a manner that works for everyone. And one has to be very, very intentional about it. Um, it- um, the other point is, again, there are as powerful, right, as the technology today is, there are also lots and lots of open problems that have still not been fully addressed. We didn't get a chance to talk about all of those, but again, uh, so what I would say is, if there are researchers, practitioners out there, there's never been a better time to be a technologist than today. The pace of technology advancement, it's like the fastest, at least that I've ever seen in my career. And yet, the number of very, very interesting, meaningful problems, right, for a technologist to work on, it's still like amazing set of PhDs to be done, as well as applied work to be done. So it's both an amazing time to be a technologist, and also amazing time, right, to be reaping the benefits of technology, because technology has advanced to a point that today a lot of problems that we would think of require, let's say, a solution based on science fiction, uh, things like personalized learning and so on. You can see those are within reach.
Got
So
it.
so
Right.
what used to be thought of as science fiction maybe even 10 years ago is becoming a reality today. So for the practitioners out there, again, this is an amazing time to start taking advantage of the technology despite its limitations.
Yeah. Shekhar and then Simin.
Yeah, so I totally concur with Manish. My theory in life, I've had 40 years of work experience. I have never seen this axiom to fail, which is we are constrained by expertise, not opportunity. This is the axiom I have seen to be consistent. So in today's AI, this is far more visible than when you have more subtle concepts like missed opportunity cost. This opportunity was there, but you didn't get to see it. But today, that's not the case. Today, you can see the opportunity staring at you. So this is one. So the tech end, extraordinary amount of work. I would also argue that I don't think the technical world even is well equipped to address all the complexities, because it's a marriage of not just tech, but tech plus what, just characterizing it simply the real world, the outside world. which people feel a little less comfortable. It's not tutored to deal with the ambiguity and the uncertainty of the external world. The second and the more important piece is, which stems from the first, which is I would say balance. In AI, we ask ourselves of the highest amount of balance. Balance socially, balance equity, balance morally, balance profit, balance technology. So this really calls for us to ask ourselves who we are. And it asks us to revisit who we are constantly, reinvent ourselves, not go by the same cow paths that we created for ourselves several years ago, and we're very successful and want to keep tread along, and we feel we want to tread along those same paths, but to just erase the whiteboard, restart with foundation principles of benefits for humanity, foundation principles of sound design, engineering design, user-centric design, scale, impact, benefit. And finally, the only way we will succeed, again, I will say, is if we address it as a market of one.
Perfect.
Highly individualized, highly personalized solutions will win the world. Because then you allow each human being to be who they are. AI will take care of the rest.
Perfect. Simi.
So I think what we're looking at is, I think there is a great possibility in AI to actually drive humanity for good. You know, there is a lot of conversation around. Of course, there's a lot of fear. Of course, there's a lot of, also tension in the ecosystem about where this will take us. But I do think that there is a huge possibility with the right kind of guardrails and right kind of intentionality and the balance that Shekhar talked about, to actually drive this, AI wave for a larger good. And I think that's a huge possibility. And I think being open to that with the right guardrails is something that I think is all of us, I would like us to take away from today's session.
Great. Thank you so much. I think you you guys made my job of summarizing it so easily. I was going to say there was a request for resources, what an NGO or other folks can use. I would try to compile some of those because a lot of people want to see how you can use AI tools at work, etc. And I think there are resources out there. Maybe we'll put them and send it to you, those who asked for that in the chat. Sorry, we couldn't get to all the questions, but in the interest of time, I want to say thank you to all the panelists. I think if I were to summarize, I was going to say what Shekhar said around, the hyper-local nature or the hyper-contextual size of one that, that AI promises with the balanced approach is what we're looking forward to. So I think exciting times ahead. Thank you, everyone. And there will be a feedback poll at the end of it. Request everybody to participate. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.